Okay, I think the stream will come up. There it is. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Very good. Welcome to you all. Welcome also to everyone watching online. Let me just check and make sure stream is good. It says stream is healthy. It tells you that. All right. It's good to know. We have a lot of questions, so we'll begin with online questions. We'll take some questions also from our local students. First question comes from Ravi, who lives in Chennai. Ravi speaks about how is it possible for our mind to negate the mind. This goes back to a basic principle of Atma Vichara, self-inquiry, that we talked about in a prior satsang, and that is anything known to you is not you. The room around you is known to you, not you. Body, known to you. Thoughts, emotions, everything that happens in your mind is known to you. On that basis, we negate the mind as being not I. I have a basic problem with that line of argument. As I understand it, the objective is to identify the real I. But it appears to me that you've already assumed a you beyond the mind while making arguments. You've already assumed. There's more to his question, but just to take that, is there an assumption in this exercise we just did? Anything known to you is you. Is that you an assumption? Or is it a fact of your experience? So the you we're referring to is not an assumed you. It's the you experience as yourself. You don't say, sorry to make a bad joke out of this, you say, I assume that I know my thoughts. You don't use that language. So in your own experience, you know your thoughts. I know my thoughts. Coming back to Ravi's question. What does you refer to? With respect to thoughts, is it not the mind that knows the thoughts? Is that your experience right now? My mind knows my thoughts. Is that what you experience? My mind knows my thoughts, or I know my thoughts. There's a basic principle in all world philosophies called Laghavam, Occam's razor, the simplest expression, the simplest answer is the right one. My mind knows my thoughts is unnecessarily complex. I know my thoughts is a completely adequate explanation. However, with regard to, is it not the mind that knows your thoughts? You made it clear there's no issue. The line of argument appears to end there, does not seem to establish something beyond your mind. So what Ravi is doing here is, which is good, he's using logical analysis to examine this process of Atma Vichara, self-inquiry. But the basis, and we always use reason and logic to catch us when we make mistakes. And we make a lot of mistakes. But what it comes down to is I know my thoughts is a simple statement of personal experience. It doesn't need the support of logic, nor can it be negated by logic, because it's a simple experience. What kind of logic? Could I convince you that you don't know your thoughts? What would I say to convince you? Oh, you're mistaken. It's all an illusion. That's contrary to your experience. One thing I think is extremely important in Advaita Vedanta is everything it teaches is consistent with your experience. Doesn't mean that your experiences are accepted on face value, because many of our experiences are misleading. But there is nothing taught in Vedanta that is contrary to your experience. Next question from Bijoy. Bijoy doesn't say where he lives. Bijoy Paul. Sounds like a very Bengali name. Perhaps he lives in Bengal. I don't know. In a recent video, I was talking about Ishvara, and I'll paraphrase this question. In a recent video, I've been just finished publishing a series of videos on the essential verses of the Bhagavad Gita on different aspects of Vedanta. And the most recent one, the last one, is Who is Krishna? Is the most recent one. So there are 5 essential verses on who is Krishna, that video. In that video, I spent quite a bit of time talking about Ishvara's intelligent order. And this is one of the very extremely important teachings of Advaita Vedanta with regard to Ishvara, with regard to God. Just to preface my comments, in Ishvara, in Advaita Vedanta, Ishvara is not a matter of faith. Full stop. If Ishvara were merely a matter of faith, I wouldn't be sitting here. Absolutely not. So that's what drew me to Puja Swami Dayananda and the teachings of Vedanta so powerfully in the 1970s. So it began, actually early 1980s. It began with Puja Swamiji explaining Ishvara without relying on blind faith. He presented Ishvara as a reality to be understood. And one aspect of that understanding is this. Ishvara is manifest in the form of the world. And I'm going to assume here that you've already heard some of these teachings, otherwise I'll spend the rest of this class explaining this. So, Ishvara is manifest as the universe, and the universe includes the laws of nature. So we can say then that Ishvara is manifest as the laws of nature, or to put a little different spin on it, how about laws of nature like the law of gravity? According to the laws of nature, which is Ishvara's intelligent order. According to Ishvara's intelligent order, this object falls down. It accelerates at the same rate, goes in the same direction, time after time after time. And I said this is one expression. I said it's one of 4 laws of nature that are expressions of Ishvara's intelligent order. Before I talk about the other 3, just to recognize that Ishvara's intelligent order is what other people call Ishvara's will. And this is an interesting perspective, I think also important. We should talk about it briefly. What other religions and other groups call Ishvara's will is what Advaita Vedanta calls Ishvara's intelligent order. So metaphorically, we can say it is Ishvara's will that this pot falls down and accelerates at precisely 9.8 meters per second per second. This is Ishvara's will. And the way we can use the word will is by understanding that Ishvara's will is not like your will or my will. Human will is fickle. We change our minds all the time, don't we? Imagine Ishvara changes his mind. And instead of falling down, it goes off sideways or something. Also, your will and my will is finite, limited. Ishvara's will governs the entire cosmos. The law of gravity applies not just here, but everywhere in the universe. This is how Advaita Vedanta approaches Ishvara, not as a matter of faith, but as a reality to be known. So Ishvara then is the source of the intelligent order of the universe, which includes the 4 fundamental laws of nature, of which gravity is one of the 4. And Bijoy wants to know what are the other 3. Well, to find out the other 3, you won't look in a Vedanta book. To find out what are the other 3 fundamental forces of nature, you should look in a physics book. Because in that physics book, you'll find that the other 3 fundamental forces of nature are electromagnetism, the nuclear strong force, and the nuclear weak force. I'm not going to describe any of these, but these are the 4 fundamental forces of nature. They govern the universe in a highly intelligent way, and that intelligence is Ishvara's intelligence. You know, when we say that in Sanskrit we use the word sarvagnya, all-knowing. Ishvara is all-knowing. Even, by the way, even other religions also have that expression. When I was a child, I was told, God is always watching you. That made me a little nervous. Because if I'm doing something naughty, then God is watching me. Turns out, that's not what sarvagnya means. God is not like some cosmic peeping Tom, keeping an eye on you at all times. Sarvagnya, all-knowing, means the source of all knowledge, the source of all intelligence, the source of the intelligent order of the universe. That's really what it means. In Sanskrit, we say sarvagnya. That not as a cosmic peeping Tom, you'll remember that expression, but rather as the source of the intelligence that gives order to the universe. Next question comes from Mahendra. Mahendra lives in Fresno. Mahendra asks, there was a discussion in a previous satsang. There was a question about Sadguru and Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. And anyway, I have a feeling they don't like each other. There's some friction between them. And if they don't like each other, then their followers don't like. Anyway, there's some spiritual politics going on there, apparently. But in our discussion, we were talking about, can they be good gurus? And my observation, which was not about Ravi Shankar, but about Sadguru, is Sadhguru said many times, and he's proud of the fact that he has never studied Hindu scriptures. He says proudly, as if it's something to be proud about. To turn your back on the wisdom of the ancient rishis, in my view, it's like, you know, the American expression, tying one hand behind your back. For someone who teaches, to turn his or her back on the wisdom that came before, to me, is an extremely unwise position to take. Now, but Mahendra goes on to say, but could they be enlightened anyway? Anything is possible. Is Sadhguru enlightened? I haven't the foggiest idea in the world. Who can know? Who can know if another person is enlightened? There is no way whatsoever of knowing whether another person is enlightened. The only person who knows is that person. And if you ask that person, are you enlightened? There's no rule that says they're going to tell you the truth. So you can't really know. So is Sadhguru enlightened? I don't know. Is Ravi Shankar enlightened? I don't know. But one thing I know for sure is that any teacher who turns his or her back on the wisdom of all who came before, I don't mean this personally about Sadhguru, but just in general. To me, it's a very arrogant position. It means I know everything on my own. I didn't need anyone to come to this understanding. To me, that it doesn't sit well with me. If it sits well with you, I have no problem with it. If you want to follow Sadhguru, go for it. But understand that you are losing contact with the wisdom of the ancient rishis. Okay, I think that covers Mahendra's question. Next question from Gordon. Gordon, I think from prior emails, if I remember, he lives in Scotland, I think. Anyway, we'll see. He's making reference to he's asking, will it eventually be necessary to update the Hindu doctrine of Vedanta, the Hindu doctrine in which Vedanta is packaged? And he refers to a recent scientific finding about a tiny fish called the cleaner rase, which has a complex inner life, behaves in complex ways, seems to have evidence of self-awareness and free will. Self-awareness. Who, by studying a fish, can you tell whether or not a fish has self-awareness? By studying me, can you prove that I have self-awareness? How would you prove that I have self-awareness? All you can do is observe my behavior and make conclusions based on the behavior. And those conclusions won't constitute proof because you haven't actually measured self-awareness. So there's some new findings about this fish which are highly unusual. They seem to suggest free will and self-awareness. I'd like to suggest that the scientist running the experiment if it's really a well-trained scientist, that well-trained scientist probably would not use the word self-awareness if the scientist knew what self-awareness means. Reflexive awareness, knowing that I am me. Because it's impossible to detect self-awareness from the outside. Like enlightenment. You can't measure it or detect it from the outside. Therefore, it's not a matter of scientific study. Science doesn't have access, we can say. Okay, take one more question here. This is a question from Anantu, who lives in Kerala. In a prior session, I mentioned that meditation alone cannot produce knowledge. And knowledge here means Atma Jnanam, self-knowledge, discovery of your true divine nature as Satchidananda Atma. And therefore, meditation alone cannot give enlightenment. This is absolutely a strong conclusion of Advaita Vedanta based on the experience and wisdom of countless great scholars and saints and enlightened people who have come before. Meditation alone will not make you enlightenment. If this is so, then how did the first rishis gain this knowledge? That's a good question. So the first rishis didn't have a teacher, not even Sadguru. Yeah, or what is it? Adi Shiva, he says. Anyway, Adi Shankar, Adi Yogi. That's what it was. Adi Yogi. It was a form of, anyway. We won't go there. Anyway, if this is so, how did the first rishi gain this knowledge? Good question. If not through meditation alone. Bad question. So here, bad question in the sense that Anantu is making an assumption that meditation is the only means available to the ancient rishis in the absence of a guru. The main practice in Advaita Vedanta is Atma Vichara, self-inquiry. Ramana Maharshi was famous for saying, Nan-yar, in Tamil. Who am I? Nan. Who am I? Self-inquiry. Tell me, do you think only Vedantins have asked that question, who am I? Do you think others have never asked that question? Christians have never asked that question? Muslims have never asked that question? How about in ancient times? How about cavemen? Of course, they wouldn't have said, who am I, or Nan-yar, but they could have had that question, who am I? So my point is that Atma Vichara, who am I, is a fundamental inquiry that anyone can do with or without a guru. And it is that Atma Vichara which is the main practice of Advaita Vedanta. So instead of assuming, as Anantu does here, Anantu assumes that the ancient rishis must have found enlightenment through meditation. It's much more reasonable to assume that they found enlightenment through Atma Vichara, self-inquiry. By the way, if they're going to practice meditation, who would they learn meditation from? Another problem. So this self-inquiry is so fundamental, as I said, even a caveman would wonder, who am I? Now, the difference, however, is if you or I were to perform self-inquiry, atma vichara, without a guru, it's highly unlikely we would get enlightened because we're not ready. We need some guidance. If it's a process of self-inquiry, like a journey, an inner journey, you need some guidance in that journey. I needed a lot of guidance from my guru. Most people do. We could say then that what distinguishes the ancient rishis is the fact that they didn't need that guidance. I suspect that they were wandering around, lost in the inner forest, so to speak, and because they were somehow uniquely blessed, they stumbled upon the truths that we now come to take for granted, the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. The rishis, by the way, there's a technical Sanskrit term, they're called mantra drashtaraha, or better term, kranti darshi. I like this term. Kranti darshi, someone who can see what no one else can see. Someone who can discover what others can't discover. The ancient rishis were uniquely blessed. If you or I do atma vichara without guidance, it's not likely to be successful. For the rishis, however, it was indeed successful. That is the greatness of the rishis. But they gained enlightenment in ancient times not through meditation. They gained enlightenment through atma vichara, self-inquiry. Okay. Do we have some questions here? Any questions here? No? There's a question in back. You'll need the microphone.
My question is, we often hear about consciousness pervading all of matter, all of reality. And I just try to get my mind around, what does that really mean? What does it mean to say that, okay, consciousness pervades a stone or an organic matter that's not light?
That's a really good question. So the ancient rishis said consciousness is all-pervasive. How did they figure that out? Well, to be honest, you can figure it out in the same way that they figured it out. Right now, consciousness is present in your experience. Suppose I ask you, how tall is your consciousness? What a weird question. How tall is it? Well, you think that's kind of strange because we don't really think of consciousness having a form. In fact, we understand consciousness to be formless. Like space is formless. Space has no particular form. There are no chunks of space. Space is formless. Consciousness is formless. That which is formless necessarily has no edge, no boundary, no limit. In the absence of any edge, boundary, or limit, what else can we conclude except that consciousness is all pervasive? Now, can we go and say that means consciousness must be in a rock, consciousness must be in this pot? How can we scientifically investigate the presence of consciousness in this pot? And there's a problem with misapplication of science. Science studies stuff. Consciousness is not stuff. In fact, it's the opposite of stuff. It is, by definition, non-material. Consciousness is a non-material reality. So if you want to use consciousness, if you want to use science to establish the presence of consciousness in the pot, you're using the wrong tool, science. If you want to use Vedanta to establish the presence of consciousness in the pot, that you can do. How can you do it? We just did it. By negation. You've probably heard that Vedanta is very fond of negation. Neti, neti. That's how it works. When you negate the possibility of any boundary or limit for consciousness, what's left? Limitless consciousness. So through negation, we understand. Then just to take it one more step, then our Buddhist friends step in, the so-called Shunyavadis. You say, well, you just negated consciousness itself. It doesn't exist. It is not only formless, boundaryless, and limitless, it is also non-existent. That's what most Buddhists would say. And they have lots of logic to support it. Lots of logic to support it. Like we have lots of logic to support the fact that consciousness has no boundary or edge. They have lots of logic to support that fact that consciousness doesn't exist. Okay. In this battle, who wins? Well, goes back to an earlier discussion we had before. Can I convince you that you're not conscious? Consciousness is a fact of our experience. No amount of logic can disprove what is obvious in your own experience. So negation has its limits. Negation, this could be the topic for a long discussion, but we're not going there. In the end, you cannot negate the negator. How's that? That is very Vedantic. You can't negate the negator. Okay. Any other questions? One more in back. You'll need the microphone.
Yes, my father has dementia, and a few months ago...
I'm sorry.
Thank you. A few months ago, it became worse and worse. It was a major stressor. My biggest fear my whole life has been losing my father. But then, after sitting with it, I came to realize and to feel that, for lack of a better term, that version of him that I knew and that version of him that I'm missing is already gone. So what I'm wondering is whether this is a wise philosophy to have towards it.
Seems like a very wise philosophy to have. When we love another person, who is it exactly that we love? Oh, that is so complicated. You're not going to say, "Oh, I love them because the physical body." Obviously not. Then you say, "Oh, I love what they say and do." When this goes to your question, I love what they say and do. They're what we generally call personality. And we come to know that just like the body is subject to decay, the personality also is subject to decay, which is exactly, sadly, what is happening. Turns out let me introduce a little bit of Vedanta in response to your question. Whatever you're attached to, now, first, one more step, and then we'll come back to that. There's one more way of looking at what you love. You don't, instead of the love being focused on the body or even on the personality, many of you would agree with the statement that love is the feeling of being connected to your loved one, regardless of the condition of the body or personality. Because you're connected you're not connected to the physical body for obvious reasons. You're not even necessarily connected to the personality unless there's a problem called attachment. The problem called attachment is when your well-being depends on the behavior of another person. In other words, when the other person makes you feel loved. I think you'll agree that's a pretty lame definition of love, right? I love you because you make me feel good. That's true all too often, but that's a lame, in my opinion, a lame definition of love. So summarizing all of that, we feel a sense of connection regardless of the body, regardless of the mind. It's a deep connection between two living, conscious beings, and that, fortunately, can be maintained even when the body decays and even when the personality decays. Let's take a few more questions online. Next question from Krishna. Krishna lives in Boston. When we speak about Ishvara, I find it interesting. In a prior paragraph, he says that in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna describes the universe in terms of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. The world is trigunatmaka, means consists of these three gunas, and whenever I teach that portion of the Bhagavad Gita or teach that topic, I always point out the fact that this is part of a pre-scientific worldview. A scientific worldview is that the world is made of matter and energy. A pre-scientific worldview is that the world is made of three gunas. But they're equivalent. They're not the same, but they play an equivalent role. Remember that we're studying the Bhagavad Gita. Are you studying no one studies the Bhagavad Gita to find out what the world is made of, right? So is the world really made of three gunas, or is it made of matter and energy? That's not what the Bhagavad Gita is about. Okay, so we understand that in the teaching of Vedanta, we have to have some way of explaining the world in which we live. And in ancient times, they explained it in terms of three gunas. Now, Krishna's question here is, I find it interesting that Sri Krishna does not give a true empirical view of how phenomenon really come about, both about nature and within our own minds. I realize that Bhagavad Gita is about spirituality, not empirical science. None of this takes away from the treasure trove it is towards seeing the world. The question, which is not exactly expressed in so many words, is why is the Bhagavad Gita and other Hindu scriptures so inaccurate when it comes to so much noise. why is the Bhagavad Gita so, and other scriptures, so inaccurate when it describes the world? A great example is almost all Hindu scriptures and the teachings of Vedanta constantly talk of 5 elements. How many elements are there? There are a bunch. And I think there's 90 some naturally existing elements, and then there are dozens that we've created over the years. And to make matters worse, one of the 5 elements that they've identified is akasha, space, which we know very well does not exist as an element. It's nothing. So then the argument, and I'm putting this argument in Krishna's mouth. It's not his argument. I'm just using this as an opportunity. Why is the ancient scriptures so inaccurate when it comes to teaching about the world? And I think based on my comments, you've already figured it out. And even Sri Krishna says, I realize that the Bhagavad Gita is about spirituality, not empirical science. So these scriptures merely rely on the prevailing world view and teach accordingly. Allow me to put a little spin on this. It should be possible to rewrite Advaita Vedanta in such a way that it doesn't mention 3 gunas at all. However, because 3 gunas is completely non-scientific. Not only non-scientific, it's anti-scientific. So then, why should we continue using this archaic model of 3 gunas in the 21st century? My gosh. Well, we do continue to use it, I think for a good reason. One is, it'd be pretty sad to throw out several chapters of the Bhagavad Gita that deal with the 3 gunas, is one reason. Another reason is it's not difficult to reconcile this ancient worldview with the modern worldview. It's easy. If you can handle all these other Vedantic teachings, why can't you handle 3 gunas and 5 elements? Of course you can. It just takes a certain perspective. For example, if you want to reconcile 3 gunas, tamas, matter, rajas, energy, sattva, who knows? Absence of both, balance of both. How about some quantum state? But not in our lifetimes, eventually our understanding of matter and energy is going to be thrown out. It will. Not soon, eventually. This whole quantum theory, right now it's a terrible mess because they haven't figured it out. When they figure it out, the end result will be that what we call matter and energy today will be archaic ideas. How's that? The day will come. So why not? We can adapt, we can continue to use these ideas. Okay, there's a couple more questions. Oh, here's a quick one. David in Fresno asks, if you had to choose one English Sanskrit dictionary for your students to use, studying along with your videos and translations, which one would it be? Well, there is one that I would recommend, which is accurate and comprehensive and accessible. It's one by Apte, A-P-T-E, Apte's dictionary. And by all means, don't get a paper dictionary. This is, I mean, I can't tell you how many hours I have spent looking through this big, by the way, it's this big, you know, and I wish I had those hours back that I spent going through. Get one on, you get a soft form. You can run, I got a Apte that runs on his tablet, no problem. Get a online dictionary, but use the one by Apte, not the student's version. It's called Apte, I think, Practical Dictionary, if I remember right. Apte's Practical Dictionary, not Apte's Student Dictionary, not Monier Williams, not anything else. Okay. Then from Chetan. Chetan lives in UK. I understand that everything is manifest from Brahman, and also my soul is Brahman. When a person dies, we say that the soul, which is Brahman, has departed from the body, which is also Brahman. So at death, Brahman leaves Brahman. I have created a dual Brahman. How can Brahman depart from Brahman? Good. And by the way, I think it's a thoughtful question that arises mostly because of a little oversimplistic use of language. So we speak of Brahman both in a manifest and unmanifest condition. You're probably familiar with the terms Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman. Saguna Brahman, Brahman with qualities, literally, which means Brahman manifest here in the world. And we distinguish Saguna Brahman from Nirguna Brahman, Brahman without qualities, Brahman as pure existence, Brahman as reality, including the reality called Atma, your true self. Now, with that in mind, we got another problem coming up. So with that in mind, obviously, to answer Chetan's question, we have to distinguish between Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman there, and with that, his question won't come up. But his question, though, is based on another misunderstanding, and that is, at death, what leaves your body? And let's be extremely clear. This is taught by Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita and all the great teachers of Advaita Vedanta. At death, Atma, your true self, Satchidananda, does not leave your body. Cannot leave your body. Why? Atma is pure consciousness. Consciousness, as we discussed before, has no boundary, edge, limits. Pure consciousness is therefore all-pervasive. Atma is all-pervasive. How can that which is all-pervasive go anywhere? It's already everywhere. So there's a misunderstanding about the doctrine of reincarnation. That which leaves the body at the time of death is called sukshma sharira, subtle body. It's a combination of mental faculties, sense faculties, prana, etc., that which makes you alive. So all those faculties together form sukshma sharira, and that is said to leave the physical body. So two kinds of questions here, or two kinds of problems in Chetan's question. Next question from Amit, who lives in India. Generally, perfectionism is not considered to be a great virtue. Many people find perfectionism to be a problem. Actually, the spouses, family members, and friends are those who usually, being a perfectionist usually affects the person himself or herself less and affects those around much more. Anyway, but his question, Amit's question, which I think is thoughtful, can trying for enlightenment be a form of perfectionism? Striving to be perfect. Well, just a very quick Vedantic analysis. Your body will never, ever be perfect. Your mind will never, ever be perfect. No matter how hard you try to have a perfect body, you go to the gym 6 hours a day. When will you have a perfect body? And you go and see the best therapists in the world, and you do tons of meditation, and you do all kinds of sadhana. When will you have a perfect mind? When you have a perfect body. You get the point. So, then, what is there to be perfected? And careful here, because your true self, Atma, is already perfect. It's always been perfect. Loosely speaking, we call it the inner divinity. Notice we don't say you become divine through your spiritual practice. We say that within you there is an inner divinity which may be undiscovered, but it exists as a fact. You already are divine. That perfection already is a fact. And last question, we'll finish this list. This question comes from Janardhan, who lives in Kochi in Kerala. Most of the important temples in India are governed and controlled by the government, which is a bit of a problem. The majority of these temples do not allow non-Hindus to enter. The reason is that non-Hindus belonging to Abrahamic religions, biblical religions, they ridicule idol worship. These days, many non-Hindus do, in fact, enter Hindu temples and pray without revealing their identity. Question, should non-Hindus also be allowed to enter Hindu temples and pray? Before we'd even try to answer the question, which is, it's a social issue. To me, it's more of a religious and social issue. Who is Hindu? So, if you say Hindu is someone born in a Hindu family, then if somebody in a Hindu family converts to Christianity, then are they still Hindu though? Because you were born in a Hindu, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. Or did they become Muslim? No, they converted. So we recognize that conversion is a fact, which means religion is not based on your DNA. Is there such a thing as Hindu DNA? On which chromosome has that gene for the Hindu gene and Christian gene? And anyway, I'm being silly right now. So it's not a matter of birth, it's not a matter of DNA. A Hindu is someone, and the best definition, I think you won't find a better one, is anyone who accepts Vedic teachings and the teachings that have evolved from the Vedas, anyone who accepts that body of spiritual knowledge as being authoritative and follows and accepts it, such a person is Hindu by definition, regardless of culture and birth, etc. Now the problem comes in temples, how to tell who is Hindu and who is not. Can you tell if a person accepts the Vedas by how they look? Okay. So then they go by dress. And especially in South India, if you want to get into a temple, then men better wear dhoti and angavastram, and women should wear a sari. Then you get in. And sometimes, if a Westerner wears dhoti and angavastram, they might get in, or they might not, depending on the mood of the guard. I'm being frank with you, because I've been there. I've dealt with those guards. It's very, sadly, it's very arbitrary. And it shouldn't be. On the other hand, Janardhan is making a point. If somebody comes to a temple, just have fun with this. Someone born in a Hindu family comes to a temple wearing tight shorts, a cut-off t-shirt, with 3 cameras around their neck. Should that person enter the temple? You see where I'm going with this. It's what is your motivation? What is your intent in going to the temple? Temple is a place of worship. So if you're going to the temple not for the sake of worship, personally, I would be absolutely fine if you were not admitted to the temple, regardless of your birth and everything else. On the other hand, if anyone were going to the temple for the sake of worship, if somebody goes to the temple with a big crucifix hanging on their chest, but they want to go for worship, if someone goes with not just pagadi, but the big beard and no mustache, very typical Muslim features, and they want to go for the sake of worship, why not? If they're going for the right, but you can see I don't want to oversimplify it, how to determine. I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that to arbitrarily keep people out of temples because of their skin color is inappropriate. But I also feel to allow Indians into a temple if they are dressed inappropriately, I have a problem with that. So something to reflect on, and a good place perhaps to end our satsang today. Oh, I forgot to make this announcement. Several weeks ago I announced that we are undertaking a online course in Advaita Vedanta, meditation, and Sanskrit. Its registration has been open. I've been just amazed that so far about 2,000 people have registered, many, many more than we expected. The reason I'm mentioning it here and now is that registration will close on Tuesday. So if you want to register, please do so by Tuesday. That won't be possible after Tuesday. Okay, I'll conclude with our prayers. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha Sarve santu niramayaha. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu. Ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Asato ma sadgamaya. Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma amritangamaya. Om Shanti 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 Om. That's it. See you next time.